Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So, could the latest act of political violence in America yesterday, with the murder of Charlie Kirk, be the spark which leads to, if not civil war, then a violent cycle of revenge and counter-revenge, where faith in the rule of law evaporates in favour of mob justice? And it's not like we can just observe this from afar in Britain. We are seeing echoes of it here. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So, with the shocking news of the assassination of far-right agitator Charlie Kirk yesterday, there are a couple of ways of looking at it. First, of course, the obvious. He was as responsible as anyone for persuading one half of America to hate the other half, to persuade them that the establishment wasn't looking out for their interests, so they have to take matters into their own hands, and that people should possess and learn how to use guns. For most people around the world, this is an insane combination of philosophies with predictable results. A monster which devours indiscriminately, including its own children. And yet, this is not just another shooting in America. It's worth noting that at the same time, there was another shooting in America, school in Denver, Colorado, leaving 2 students in a critical condition and the shooter dead. 2 shootings, but which one is going to lead to wider repercussions? First, a man was shot dead in front of his wife and children. Those children have suffered severe trauma. They are now much less likely to grow up into emotionally stable adults. This is not helping anyone's cause. We see what cycles of violence do to entire populations around the world, most notably in the Middle East these days, but there are examples everywhere. But an eye for an eye, as they say, only makes the whole world blind. This act may result in revenge attacks against people who may be completely innocent, but seen as in the other tribe. In Congress last night, in the wake of the shooting, a Republican shouted that this was the fault of the Democrats. Ridiculous. When Trump decried political violence, without a hint of irony last night, after the political violence he has unleashed upon America, he listed Republicans who'd been attacked, going back to 2017. He did not mention any Democratic victims, of which there have been several, one being murdered just a few months ago. That is the key difference. The Democrats are not only calling for tighter restrictions on guns, but they consistently condemn political violence regardless of who the victim is. The Republicans only condemn it these days when the victims are in their tribe. So there's a sense in which this violence is absolutely being driven by just one side. But, and this is a big but, that's the leaderships of the 2 tribes. Within the ranks, there is a different feeling. Reading a Guardian piece on the rising tide of political violence, and it cited polling which said 25% of Republicans supported Trump using the military to enforce his own political agenda. 40% of Democrats support the use of force to remove Trump from power. Now, perhaps the greater percentage for the Democrats right now is because they are in the weaker position. But it's still a large minority of both tribes effectively supporting violence for certain ends at least, and both feeling justified in doing so. And when you have a society where you are actively encouraged to own military-grade weapons and learn how to use them expertly, it doesn't take an organised gang to unleash serious violence on society. I obviously don't know anything about the murderer yesterday, or the motivation, I can guess. But it's entirely possible they were a lone wolf. Entirely possible. In the UK, such an attack would be fairly unthinkable. Access to guns is severely restricted. No citizen would be allowed the sort of rifle used yesterday. Even violent criminals in the UK would find it almost impossible to get a weapon capable of picking off a target at 200 yards, or get training on how to use it as a private citizen. Of course, criminals can still obtain firearms illegally, like we do have shootings in the UK, but because there's no lawful market for the weapons, shootings are incredibly rare. And mass shootings, I mean, they haven't happened since I was a kid, because even criminals can only get shit quality guns if they get them at all. Yet, we're still not immune to political violence in the UK. Just last month, I talked about the latest polling in the UK, which not only showed that the vast majority of Britons fear political violence, but a worrying minority think it's justified, in certain situations at least. We're not quite on the same level as America yet, in terms of either beliefs or capacity, thank goodness. But the direction of travel is not encouraging. Naturally, Tommy Robinson took full advantage of the killing by blaming Starmer for encouraging political violence. when he has consistently condemned it. Also, Robinson was organising violence on a grand scale in Britain last summer when Starmer had only just got his feet under the table of 10 Downing Street, and he's trying it again this summer. You know, later this month, just in a few days, he's going to attempt it again. But as Britain is also becoming increasingly tribal, not enough people will look at Tommy Robinson's statement and go, "Don't be stupid, mate." Like, those who see it as ridiculous are those who already see him for what he is. But I would urge people to really look at what people are saying. In the US and the UK, there are people condemning all political violence. There's no yes, but all political violence. But even those on the far right are still using it to stoke more hatred. Tommy Robinson in the UK, Laura Loomer in the US, I've seen. You know, they're not calling for calm. They're actually raising the temperature further. They're promising vengeance, right? Mind you, we do have one built-in advantage in the UK, as well as gun laws, of course. Unlike in the USA, the UK wasn't born out of revolutionary fervour. In England, which is the most likely source of a trigger if we did end up going down that road, we had a revolution. We killed the king. But then we put his son back on the throne and said, sorry for all the fuss. We don't have this sense of having to defend a revolution with our lives or anything. Americans tend to be fed a diet of needing to be ever armed and ready to defend their republic from threats both from within and without. Now, you couple this with a media network which is training Americans to see enemies everywhere, and you've got a powder keg. And consider the situation right now. America has a weak-minded president who is known to be motivated strongly by acts of revenge. He's already felt justified in using state-sanctioned political violence simply to enforce his will. He hasn't yet used it as an act of violence, only to further his own political needs. He has already blamed the radical left for this murder, even though nothing is known about the killer yet. In the UK, for example, so we've had murders in the past decade of a Labour and a Conservative MP. And, you know, if you didn't know much about it, you may think, well, one was killed by the extreme right and one was killed by the extreme left, right? No, both murders were by the extreme right. Now, it's entirely possible that the murderer, when caught, turns out to identify as radical left, as Trump puts it, or even a Democrat. All hell will break loose. But let's say they're not. Let's say the gunman's actually MAGA and has some weird reason to have wanted Kirk dead. Or perhaps they just wanted to fire the starting pistol on a civil war to accelerate things, and he just happened to put himself in the firing line. Is this what will come out of the official statements? Will Trump's government report the facts to the public as reported to him? I mean, if it suits his agenda, yes, of course he would. But what if the facts as reported to him don't suit his agenda? Will he change it to suit? Will the American public trust any official statements on the killer? What if the killer evades justice for not just hours or days, but weeks or months? Will Trump fear that the public see him as too weak to defend even his own? Because Trump was very openly close to Kirk. He will take his murder personally, that someone has taken something that belongs to him. He'll demand vengeance. What if the authorities can't trace the murderer? Will Trump feel this undermines his credibility as a strong protector? Will he turn to more extreme methods? Oh, and the far right, of course, will amplify the crap out of any figures seen as being on the left or liberal side who are attempting to downplay the horror of the murder or engage in whataboutery. I'd probably recommend not doing that. So even for those who think this murder is a case of the arsonist getting burned, it has the potential to lead to a chain of events whereby completely innocent people suffer here. In both the UK and the US, because the extremists are using this to stoke further hate and division. So Trump is right in a sense. It is a dark day. Doesn't matter who the victim is. There is a victim of political violence, and that does humanity no good in at all. Zero chance of any good coming from this, only more pain. The best response is to condemn all political violence, not base that condemnation on the nature of the victim. After all, if you have faith in your own political beliefs, you can argue your case. You don't need violence. Otherwise, we're just feeding the tribalism which will doom us all. After all, either all political violence is wrong or people can choose. And if you're going to say people can choose, then people who disagree with you can choose differently. Which is better for society? But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.